In this video, we're going to be talking about Chapter 6, which is all about those during reading strategies, and they focus on improving comprehension and recall. We will also talk a little bit about FixUp Strategies as well. So if you read Chapter 6, which you should have by now, or at least the pages that I asked you to read, you'll notice in that first little vignette about the student who did not like reading. She only liked soccer. She was very angry about it. Students who are frustrated with reading a lot of times will come out in anger or behavior issues. But it's good as a teacher, of course, not to give up on them, but to figure out what is really wrong. And so the author found out she had a lack of prior knowledge. She was not interested. It was all boring. And that probably had a lot to do with maybe the choice of reading materials that she had. But there were two key things that the student lacked. The student did not have or didn't know the importance of prior knowledge. She didn't have the vocabulary that was needed to comprehend the books that she was reading. And then she also lacked the ability to monitor comprehension while reading. The teacher had said that she could decode just fine. She could decode grade level text, which means she could sound them all out and do all of that, but then she couldn't say anything about what she had just read. And so Rob said that struggling readers are often unaware that they lack knowledge and strategies that can improve comprehension. So they don't have background knowledge, they don't know that they need that, and they're not sure which strategies or how they can fix it. So she even said that the student could even name some of the strategies that her teacher had taught her, but she didn't know how to apply them. And so that was important to give her the strategies, to put some tools in her toolkit, so to speak, so she could be successful in her reading. So again, we're going to really stress the role of metacognition, because obviously the student from the opening scenario did not even know that she was not comprehending. She was just saying the words and going on because she was not interested. And so we have to remember that that metacognition is really, really important. And by this time, we will have read a scenario, or maybe we'll do this in class, about an unfamiliar topic. So what do you do when you read something that is very unfamiliar? For instance, my husband is a mechanical engineer, and he has brought me one of his textbooks from when he was getting his master's degree before, and I try to read the text and I have no clue. I live with the man, I talk with him, I listen when he talks about his job, but I still do not have the foundational knowledge that's needed to understand a topic. So it's really difficult for me. But that's not a required reading for me. So what do I do when I'm reading and I just totally do not get it? It's an unfamiliar topic to me. Some options could be reread something, or try to paraphrase it, put it in your own words, ask questions. I usually write things in the margins. I try to connect it to something that I do know. I might have to look up other information about it just to get that foundation where I can have a connection. So it's really difficult if you don't have that foundational knowledge, but it's even more difficult if you don't even know when you don't understand. So when readers can determine what they do and don't understand, then they can access those fix-up strategies that help them. So you got to know what you don't know, but then you also have to have the tools to help you. So why does metacognition matter? It helps you in that you can pause frequently and ask questions. When you understand your thinking processes, you can then be more thoughtful, obviously, in the way you approach a text and understanding. So students who barrel through reading that they don't think about, they cannot comprehend. They can't make connections. They can't really file that in their schema for later use. it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. So connections have to be made along the way, and there are several different ways that you can teach your students to be self-monitoring. So you want them to understand how to do it, maybe by watching you through Think Aloud and modeling, but also you want them to internalize that and become knowledgeable and then self-monitor on their own. So how do you support all readers with this metacognitive process? Obviously with strategies, right? But you also need to give students time. They will not be able to do this the very first time you ever model it for them. They need lots and lots of practice time. Let them know that it's okay not to understand. It's interesting to hear students talk about, good readers or good students or people that never have questions. They always know what to do. But you as a teacher need to create that safe environment for students to be able to risk something. Maybe it's their reputation, maybe it's their feelings, maybe it's, whatever, but they need to be able to put themselves out there, and that means you have to have a safe environment in your classroom. That's not always easy to do, especially in middle school, because kids like to make fun of each other and all of that. But if the safe environment is not necessarily in with everybody in your classroom, it might be that conference time between you and that student where they know that it's okay for them to ask you questions, for them to not understand, and to need help with some of those strategies. Another thing is, do not accept failure. In this little story at the first of the chapter, the student just was ready to give up, but the teacher would not let her fail. So if you don't know how to help a student, keep trying to figure out what to do. Ask somebody for help, for suggestions. That's really important. You can't give up on these students. You also need to teach self-monitoring vocabulary. In other words, these students are old enough to understand the word metacognition, the word self-monitoring, and in-the-head strategies. In other words, help them to understand what those words are, so when you ask them what questions about why they are tripping up or what information they need, they can say, I don't have enough information, I can't figure out my metacognition, I don't know how to self-monitor. So it'll be helpful to you if everybody's using the same vocabulary. And also it's important to explain the purpose of metacognition. If you're going to teach students to use their thinking strategies, then they need to know why. So help them to understand that. Teach them why they need to know it. And then monitor the strategies, obviously. We've talked about it at length through Think Alouds. And this is really important so students know that you use them too as an adult, and so do other adults. So this is how readers read in real life. And so it's not just in school, it's not just something that they'll read in maybe an assigned book or a textbook. It's actually used throughout your life when you're reading and comprehending. So about some of these fix-up strategies. Why do these texts confuse readers? Why do they need fix-up strategies? Some texts that students are reading might contain too many new and specialized words. In other words, if they're reading science and they're talking about photosynthesis or mitosis, those are words that they will not encounter very much except in that situation. So that building up that vocabulary is really important there. Also, there are texts that contain long strings of facts that are really hard to process. So it's important that students kind of stop and pause and maybe break it up and categorize or organize these facts. And that can be done with some of the strategies that we'll talk about or that you will be doing in your mini lessons. And then sometimes the texts have several complex or compound sentences in one paragraph. So, when students are younger, they'll read just simple sentences that make up a story. Then you start adding conjunctions, which make compound sentences, and then they get more and more complex with phrases and all kinds of descriptive things. So you need to teach them how to break those sentences down to understand that. And so how do they help? They help students figure out unknown words through context clues, and back to those word parts when we're talking about vocabulary knowledge in the last chapter. Those word parts, the prefix and suffix and the roots and all of that, help them to understand. And then rereading and close reading. Tell students and show them and model for them that it is okay to slow down, to reread a passage that you don't understand, and to closely read and really analyze the text. So you will find several of the strategies in Chapter 6. We're going to, again, analyze one of them. I will model one, and then we will have the next group of students to do their mini lessons in our kind of small group rotation that we did the last time. And that is all for this chapter.